there are other perspectives in music outside of the music school academic who can play in 17 at 360 BPM and reharmonize the whatever. Like, it's like, yeah, that perspective isn't the only way. By the way, now I want to, speaking of that, something else to remember in music school. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Something else to look out for in music school. Don't get caught up in the technology. Okay, technology I'm using as a metaphor to represent certain skills, certain knowledge that you can use to enhance music. Things like odd meters, things like fast tempos, things like crazy harmony and the whatever, all this stuff. Like the Barry Harris stuff I was talking about earlier, for example, right? Don't confuse that, the technology. Don't confuse the complicated, crazy, cool shit, the theory, the whatever, with the actual thing, the sound, the music that you're making, the vibe the emotion that you want to create. Don't confuse the theoretical aspects with what you're with the vibe, the feeling, the spirit that you're trying to make, right? All those crazy things, that's just a means to an end. You still have to play from the heart, okay? And I relate this to, and again, like I think in music school, especially like, a lot of those quote unquote like jazz programs, whatever, on the East Coast, it's all about, who can play whatever tune at 360 BPM and 17/8, and you got the crazy reharmonization and the septuplet swing and all that bullshit, the negative harmony, all that, right? There's a Steve Jobs quote that I think about all the time, and I talk about it on the stream, like, I think I've talked about it maybe one or two other times, but most of y'all probably haven't heard me say it, so I'm going to say it again. Steve Jobs has the best quote about this. He says that engineers make the worst designers. Engineers are obsessed with technology. What engineers do when they make a product is they cobble together all the craziest technology that they know, the fastest processing speed, the best RAM, whatever, the fucking best graphics, best everything, and they just cobble it together, and then they put it in a box, and then they give it to a consumer who, at this time in the 80s, doesn't even know how to use a computer yet. And it doesn't have, and the computer doesn't have good software, but it has the best hardware in the world. And it turns out, though, it's shitty. People don't know what to do with that information. I think musicians are very similar, by the way. Right? They cobble together all the craziest shit that they can think of. But then on the other end, it's like, that shit doesn't sound good. Like, what are we talking about? Then what he says is designers make the best products because they think about the user experience and go backwards. They think about what they need on the other end first, what problems their thing is supposed to solve, and then they work backwards. And they go, okay, well, people want to use this to write papers for their college class. We should probably have a nice piece of software, of word processing software, which at the time was like amazing technology when that came out, right? Obviously, like every computer has that now, but back then it was a crazy idea. And they work backwards. And that's why I really love, when I got out of school, I basically was working, every musician that I knew was like in that engineer camp, right? They were like, ooh, negative harmony. Like they knew what negative harmony was, right? They had transcribed a Bela Bartok orchestra thing and they knew how to write like that. They knew how to play in 17 and they knew how to play really fast tempos and they knew all the alternate bridges to rhythm changes, right? They knew all that stuff, the music school stuff. But then when I started hanging out with people like Mind Design, people like Swarvy, people like Sam I Am, I went over to Sam I Am's house probably 3 or 4 times over the course of a month. And I learned an insane amount from him, but I'll say that for another day. These guys are designers. They're thinking about they They have a spirit and a vibe that they're reaching for. And then they make the music that satisfies that. They're not going this other weird way of like, well, I need to incorporate some negative harmony here. Like, what? That's not to say that stuff can't be useful. But what I'm saying is that music school way of thinking, that bottom-up thinking and not top-down thinking, don't get caught up to the point where you think that's the only way to do it. Herbie Hancock, music isn't about music, it's about feeling. Yes. Yes. Herbie is a perfect embodiment of what I'm talking about, by the way. You got to be able to think upside down and backwards. And music school, which, by the way, just the idea of school and getting grades, that all comes from the early 20th century, this idea of the industrial complex, which, like the current world that we're in, if you go to public school in America or private school in America, the most important thing in being a student there is they are training you to be an obedient worker. Someone who will show up to class every day, and it's against the law to skip school. And at my school, we actually had citizenship grades, right? I'm from San Diego. San Diego, we had citizenship grades. Like, you could fail by getting a bad citizenship grade by not showing up or just by being a dick in class. It was all about training obedient workers. And that came about in the early 1900s when factories were the largest employers in America. And if you had good grades, or rather after that, like a little bit after that, when all these other jobs come about, like in World War II, right? Having good grades means that not only does it mean that you're smart, but also means you're obedient, that you can show up and you can do your job, and that you're normal, and that you can do a job and work in a company and work at a desk. That's what it's all about. So the point of what I'm trying to make is that music school inherently is kind of doing that. It's actually regimenting you and making you think the same way as everyone else. That's how they're able to give you a grade. You get a grade based on, did you solve the same material that is given to everybody else? Which is kind of antithetical to what your musical journey, the idea of a musical journey should actually be at a certain point. So what I'm saying is, when you go to school and you start learning like theory and harmony, like you will believe that you're not caught up in it. But you're wrong. You will be caught up in it, because it's all that, unless you really have a life outside of music school, I think everyone is going to be, what's the word? Everyone is prone to that sickness that I was talking about earlier, of believing that this is like how everybody thinks, because that'll be your environment. 100% of the people that you know will be thinking that way, because that's what your classes are. We all learn the same things. We all play the same tunes for 4 years. We all go to the same jams. We hang out with the same people, right? We don't hang out with the classical people. We don't hang out with the people who play other types of music. Part of that, by the way, is useful. There is actually something really useful to that model. However, you just need to be aware that when you leave music school, that shit's going to change.